They are 2,000-time miniature people. Because of the risk of the world's population boom, the tiny people will spend less. $1,000 can be spent like $100,000. They will become rich quickly. Paul and his wife still have a hard time in middle age. They decide to make themselves miniature. Anyone who wants to shrink must shave off their hair. They do not ignore anything, even a little. After preparing, Paul and the others are brought to the dental area to pull out their teeth. That helps them to be miniature. Then, they are taken to the miniature chamber. The door is locked and the chamber begins working. After a sleep, Paul will be able to leave his current life behind and enjoy his wealth. There is a sound indicating the completion of the process. The nurses come with small strollers. They use the shovels to put the 10-centimeter people on the miniature bed. Then they take them to the tiny world boundary. On the other side, the miniature nurses welcome them. The nurses replant Paul's teeth. The miniature process is done. Paul slowly wakes up. A nurse scares him because she is bringing a cracker. A normal cracker is now enough for Paul to eat in months. This moment, Paul remembers that his wife has not come yet. Not long after, his wife calls him. It turns out that after shaving, she was afraid. She could not be able to leave her family and friends. Now, she is at the airport to come back home. Paul is very angry after hearing that. He decided to do this process just because he wanted them to have a better life. However, how could she leave him alone like that? They have a big argument. And Paul's wife suddenly hangs up the phone. Nevertheless, he has to move on. The guide man takes Paul to the miniature world. A city for miniature people is covered by a transparent veil. It will protect them from not only the UV radiation, but also the wild animals. After entering here, the life will be very peaceful and comfortable. Because the tiny people are using their true identity. The crime rate here is almost zero. That's such an ideal world. The guild man leads Paul to a villa. It looks like a castle which Paul has never dreamed of before. Paul feels uncomfortable when he sees the things that are prepared for him and his wife. In this moment, the doorbell rings. A delivery man steps from a van. He is carrying two huge metal rings. They are the rings of Paul and his wife. Paul then receives the divorce petition. Anyway, a 10-centimeter person and a 160-centimeter person cannot live together. Because the property is split in half, Paul's dream of a rich life is also destroyed. He has to move to a small apartment. Paul also finds a job as a customer consultant. That day, Paul uses all his money to buy a rose in real size. Because he is dating with a single mother. But it seems like they are not good together. Paul leaves with anger. He joins a party of a neighbor, Dustin. Paul gets drunk when he thinks of his recent bad lucks. The day after, Dustin looks at Paul with an unhappy look. He tells Paul that chances are everywhere. For example, a cigarette in normal world can create 2,000 cigarettes in tiny world. The wine is also having more profit. Paul realizes that there is also hoarding in this perfect world. Then, a disabled worker named Lian attracts the attention of Paul. Before getting smaller, Paul is a therapeutic doctor. He offers to help her adjust her artificial leg to release her pain. However, Lian refuses. She wants Paul to come with her and help her seriously ill friend. They get in the bus to go. After changing 3 buses, they finally reach the border of the small city. They see a tunnel dug through the protection veil. On the other side, there are slums for the poor. It turns out that even in this world, there are many people who need help. Arriving at Lian's room, the situation of the woman lying on the bed is not very good. Paul can only give her some painkillers to temporarily ease her pain. When he is fixing Lian's leg, she says that she was involved in politics. Then she was arrested and was forced to be miniature. Later, although she could escape, but she lost one leg due to it. Listening to this, Paul admires her when he thinks about his quiet life. He accidentally breaks Lian's artificial leg. That's why he has to stay and help her. Not only does he help her clean up, but he also goes to restaurants to collect the leftovers. Then, they will come back to the slums and give them to the elderly here. A few days later, Dustin invites Paul to go for a trip, because he wants Paul to escape here. The people board the ship to go to Norway. There are ships with Dustin's wine and sausages behind them. On the journey, they meet Dr. Asgeros, the inventor of miniature technique. However, he is so sad now. As it turns out, many years ago the scientists predicted that the population would boom, and the resources would be used up. Therefore, he invented the miniature technique. But after all those years, the population has only decreased by a third. The human will go to extinction after a few hundreds of years. On this romantic journey, Paul usually massages Lian's broken leg. They have feelings for each other. They quickly reach the location of miniature people in Norway. The people here are conducting a secret construction. To avoid the apocalypse, the doctor led the residents to dig a 1.6-kilometer tunnel. The whole tunnel is covered by a very solid layer of alloy. The other side of the tunnel is full of creatures. It's like an underground Noah's Ark. They have a plan to settle here for about 8,000 years. Until the ground is stable again. Tomorrow is the day everyone moves. In the dinner, the doctor gives his last speech. Seeing the people's enthusiasm and excitement, Paul has a mission in his mind. Therefore, he wants to join them to save the world. But Lien believes that if the humanity perishes, it is the problem, and hundreds of years later, it has nothing to do with them. But Paul thinks about his failed life. He is believing that it is the only thing he could do. The next day, everyone says goodbye to the sun for the last time. Then they walk to the tunnel. Paul is pulling his luggage into it. He discovers that the tunnel is going up. The man nearby tells him that in order to avoid the deluge, they have to climb in 11 hours and reach the underground city. Paul is watching the people walking away. He feels ambiguous. If he leaves his world again, can he really change his life? At the last moment, Paul changes his decision. He runs out of the door and hugs Lien. I'm sorry, maybe I am not a man who's intended to do a big mission. At the end, Paul and Lien come back to the slums. They start taking care of the people in need. Actually, science fiction is just the label of this movie. Deep inside, that is the risk of middle-aged people. Paul originally wanted to change his life by miniature process. He did not expect that his life would be getting worse. In his eyes, everyone next to him is living a more valuable life than himself. Even a disabled woman living in the slums has a will to fight, and has more energy than normal people. After arriving in Norway, Paul finally wins himself. It is not necessary to make something big. It is important that you could see your potential. You should live in harmony, cherish your life, and become more tolerant. You should accept your normality also. Because what is miniature is just your body, not your life.